the violence in the book is, particularly if you like read a lot of horror fiction. Horror fiction, in the same way romantic stories do, have a kind of, they fall into one of two categories where like it's either the book is building up and describing the scene almost too much as if it wants the scene itself and the goriness of it to be the shock value as opposed to the context it's in, or it wants to be like the more Stephen King side of it where like everything around the scene is what's making you afraid, so what you actually see doesn't actually have to be that scary. And American Psycho, the book, is somewhere in that middle ground where like the exposition is constantly bashing you over the head, and it's because of that, because the exposition is the context that the things you see start getting scarier and more violent, and because the movie doesn't have the same sort of like constantly berating you about what's happening in like 10 pages of hair care products and stuff like that, the violence doesn't carry that same sort of like, it doesn't have that same sort of like catharsis in the way that it does in the book. But it works in a weird way because when this movie came out, the soundtrack for it was like the controversial film. People thought it was like hyper violent and stuff like that. And the way it is now, I feel like it's almost really restrained and really artsy in its violence as opposed to in any way glorifying. Like in a world where Game of Thrones and Walking Dead are the two biggest TV shows on television, I just don't see this as a violent movie. Like it's so hard for me to see this as like, this is the movie that thinks violence is artsy and fun and expressionist. It is not a violent movie.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. I think that, like, the violence in the book is the thing that makes it just, like, really, really expressly hard to get through. I don't feel like the book glorifies the violence so much as it tries to, like, legitimately sicken you with it. And that's why we go into such detail of, like, I shoved a live rat up a woman's pussy and then cut her in half with a chainsaw before cooking her femur in the oven and eating bits of it. I'm like, Jesus fuck, that is never leaving my brain. And it's described with the same casualty of Van Patten is wearing leather shoes with a, you know, Armani suit today, and it clearly looks better than mine. And so to not see that happen in the movie, to see, like, you know, we only get one major scene of intense violence. Like, even when he goes on his fucking action movie spree, it's like, you know, we see, like, the one lady get shot, but there's not that much blood. We see the cops get shot at, but they just fall down. There's not, like, a lot of, like, just the gruesome, intense detail that you get in the book.
So what you're saying is you would have been more okay if, like, Eli Roth made this, right?
I mean, you know, like...
I'm mostly being facetious. I'm
honestly, if we were to adapt every scene from the book, Hostel would look like a fucking kid's film.
Honestly, though. Yeah.